Welcome, everybody, to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. As you know, I talk about the 4 different types of freedom: time, financial, location, health freedom. And in that light, I'm always scouring the globe, interviewing successful entrepreneur people on the cutting edge, serving their customer and changing world. So today we have LJ, and she dubs herself as a sales outsourcing specialist, and she's the founder of Sales Closers. So today's talk is going to be all about sale, the view of from corporate sales exec to freelance sales closer, and it's going to be a great conversation all about how to increase revenue in your business using sales. So with that, I'll let her introduce herself and welcome her onto the show. So Laura, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Christopher. What a great introduction. So yeah, just to add to that, I'm the founder of Sales Closers, and what we do is essentially help entrepreneurs to scale faster by outsourcing the sales to experienced sales closers. So yeah, I've got a track record of more years in sales than I care to imagine or care to remember, should I say. So about 23 years in sales, and probably even a little bit before that when I was a student, right? So sales has been my jam for all of my career at this point, going from corporate, like you say, to freelance, and now running my own agency.
Yeah. What's interesting is, the 3 pillars of a business is sales, marketing, and innovation. And so, if you don't have sales, you don't have revenue. People have to give you money for your services. So, I know you started from corporate sales exec, and now you're a freelance sales closer. Tell us the transition to that, and kind of what are the different skill sets that people need if they want to become like entrepreneurial sales closers.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did probably about 12 years in corporate sales before making the shift into freelance. There are definitely some core differences there. I mean, for me, it happened just shortly after I got married. Before I got married, I kind of had this vision of how life was going to be post wedded bliss. My intention was to have a family. So I actually started thinking about freelance prior to that. So it was only a couple of months actually after I got married that I made the leap. And a lot of that came down to the reason I was toying with freelance was a personal development journey that I was on, thanks to sales, actually, thanks to some of the corporate sales training I'd been on. I remember one of the sales trainers that had trained us at the time, he used the analogy. He started by saying, hey, how much do you think, an executive is making? And we were kind of, guessing at, maybe 60, 70, 80, up to 100, on an annual basis. And he said, right. And he said, how much training do you think they do to do their job and do it well? It's like, well, you'd hope they do a lot of training. And he said, and as sales executives, how much are you earning? And of course, decent corporate sales executives could be earning up to 6 figures at the time. And the question came back, it's like, and how much training are you doing? And I was like, oh, actually, it's quite easy when you've been in a job for a while to start coasting. So that started me on a personal development journey that in field sales, as I was at the time, turning my car into a bit of a mobile university, and learning. So my confidence was building in terms of the more I got to know about myself, which gave me the impetus, if you like, to then step out and go alone. And I think for me that the crux was I was turning up to sales meetings and thinking, I would love to be consulting with you on more than what my company can offer, because I know X, Y, and Z that could really help you, but I can't talk about that when I'm here today because I'm representing X company, So yeah, that was it. So I guess in terms of that transition, to answer your question, it takes I suppose, an understanding of yourself and your own skill set, and a confidence in that, and really a certain amount of courage stepping into going freelance or going it alone. It's like you're moving away from the security of an employed role and a salary to actually, making it work for yourself. But if you have the skills as a salesperson, and I'm always saying this, is like, you are going to be so sought after in the entrepreneurial world. I mean, like you said, right at the start of the interview, sales, without sales, there is no business, right? So, good salespeople are in high demand. There's just a bit of a shift in terms of mindset. It's quite fast paced in the entrepreneurial world. And I suppose you become more of an expert as well, because not all entrepreneurs are familiar with sales. They're probably familiar with their thing or their delivery, but not necessarily an expert in sales.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because you brought up 2 points. One was this idea of personal development and turning your what you call your spare time or net time, where you're just like walking or driving, whatever, and then turning that into your education. So podcast, Audible, all of that is all YouTube. And then you talk about conversation with your actual client. A lot of the sales industry gets a bad rap because but talk about like conversations that convert and the art and science behind closing more high ticket sales.
Yeah. So there is definitely an art and a science to it. I would say I come more from the emotional perspective. So for me, it's about connecting at a really deep level when you talk about high ticket sales and having courageous conversations. So, to get someone to part with a large sum of money, A, they've got to trust you, and B, they've got to believe whatever it is you are selling is going to solve a problem for them. So for me, quite often you can be in a position with someone in a high ticket sales conversation where you're asking questions that they haven't necessarily been used to answer in the past. So, you've got to create a space of trust that they can be vulnerable, if that makes sense, Christopher. And that's a real skill, actually, because opening up to someone takes a lot. Some of the stuff that can be shared by prospects on these conversations, they may not even have shared with their spouse how they're feeling about these things, So the rapport and the trust are absolutely the key things for me that'll make the shift to selling more in high ticket selling. And that doesn't come down to, I'm certainly an advocate for scripts and structures in the sales process, but a lot of that comes down to intuition as well, and really be able to understand a person in the conversation.
Yeah, it was a wonderful answer. And now we go from corporate sales to freelance sales, and then now you're talking about outsourcing your sales team. So hiring people that are good at what they do, and then bringing the revenue. And then you talk about this idea of talking about surrendered sales and the art of outsourcing sales successfully. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and you've got to be really brave, actually. Even for someone who, calls himself an outsourcing specialist, the first time I outsourced sales was nerve-wracking. So I get it. I think for entrepreneurs, if they're building something, it's like their baby, right? So it's like handing that off to someone else to do the selling is a really nervy process, but it's absolutely key. It's like, if we look at entrepreneurs like Richard Branson or Elon Musk or, whoever else, they are not on the phone taking their own sales calls. At some point, they have to be, maybe they started that way, but at some point you've got to be able to outsource the sales conversation. So what I would say for entrepreneurs, there's this myth that by handing it over to a salesperson, they are not going to understand their industry or do it as well as what they can do. But actually what happens is, by not outsourcing, they are preventing themselves from scaling in the same way, because actually if you're sitting having to have 5 sales conversations a day, let's say, at maximum, well, you're not then working on your business. You're so busy in it. And then where does the delivery come in and that kind of thing? So actually, you're stunting your own growth by not outsourcing, be that sales or any other aspect of your business, actually. So it's absolutely key to be able to do that. And the other thing you find is by outsourcing sales, quite often, yes, a salesperson is never going to know as much about your business as you do or your industry. But I even say to entrepreneurs, it's not necessarily even as important for them to understand your niche or your industry, because they can learn that. But if they can match your values, right, and reflect your brand in a way, and they can pick this stuff up, actually, they're in a better position to close, because they're less likely to start consulting on the line or giving their time for free or starting to solve. Entrepreneurs can't help it. If they see a problem, they're like, oh, I need to fix it, and they're starting there before even the transaction has happened. So a lot of the time they could even be talking themselves out of sales, because someone turns up with, I know most of your audience are physicians, right? If someone turns up with a broken arm and you just put a plaster on, they're going away. They haven't actually fixed their problem. So as salespeople, how I see it is, well, actually, they're going to do a better job of staying above the problem, helping them to understand what's going on. So that kind of initial triage call, if you like, and then position the entrepreneur as the expert who can solve the problem after payment has been exchanged.
Yeah, it's funny because as you mentioned, as entrepreneurs, kind of were control freaks, type A, and micromanaging, and when you and it's this dichotomy between time and money. So as a startup, you want to bootstrap and keep your expenses low, stay lean, and then when you start to grow, have all these assignments and tasks, and it's hard to just pay somebody to do that. And it's almost like a paradigm shift. It's oh, I'll pay somebody, frees up my time, but then it's it's dichotomy. So this idea of surrendered sales, and which you described very elegant. Talking about so people listening to this podcast, they're doing all the selling themselves. They're on these calls and they want to outsource their sales team. Talk about the do's and don'ts of sales outsourcing as we prepare your business to scale.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I would say is you absolutely do need to prepare. So quite often I'll speak to entrepreneurs who kind of see hiring a salesperson as a silver bullet to scale, or to get more sales through the door. That's absolutely not how you should view them. How you should look at them is more scaling something that's already working. Okay, so salesperson comes in, they are not going to know the ins and outs of your business, even though they might know the sales process. So as entrepreneurs, we keep things in our head, so much information. It's I don't know, if you cut open an entrepreneur's head, it'd just be crazy, all the information going on in there. So I'd say the first thing is absolutely map out your sales process from start to finish. So what needs to happen before the sale, during the sale, and then after the sale, so someone can literally follow that process step by step and know what happens. And it might be that you don't even think you have a process right now. I can guarantee you do have a process. If you're listening to this thinking, I don't have a process, you do. It's just that you haven't got it out of your head and onto paper, and that will actually help hone that process as well. The other thing I would say, if you're doing your own sales calls at the minute and don't already, start recording those, because particularly if you're looking to hire a remote sales closer, they don't have the benefit of sitting in an office beside you, hearing the nuggets that are coming out, the kind of little tidbits that you would expect working in an office with someone. So by recording those calls, you can really hear what prospects, what questions they're asking, also how you talk about your service. What we're not looking here for here is, the art of sales, that it's more about how you talk about the service and the types of questions, the types of objections that come up and how you handle those. And then a couple more things really that I would say in terms of preparing to outsource is having your ideal client, so who they are and who they aren't, so that they're not going to sell to someone who is just not an ideal client for you at all, and then you end up having a refund or whatever that might look like. And finally, then, CRM, some kind of CRM system if you don't have one already. I mean, that could look as simple as a Google Sheet or something like that until you start getting scaled. But I would say as you scale, you need to have a CRM system in place that's tracking the leads, that you're able to put notes against, that you know exactly where people are at in the pipeline, and you're not missing any sales then who go into follow up because they're there and visible, and everyone then knows what's happening, in real time.
As we're coming to the close of this conversation, really very interesting. And then we talk about kind of sales success from a business owner standpoint. And we'll kind of end with your personal development. So if you could go back and give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, that one links definitely into personal development. There's so much advice I would love to go back and give my 18-year-old self. But I would say first and foremost is learn who you are. Really identify where your gifts and strengths are sooner so that you can step into those. And I think that really does relate to entrepreneurs as well, is like stay in your lane of genius, right? And outsource anything that is not, because it's just going to deplete your joy and your energy. So for an 18-year-old or, a new entrepreneur, if they pick that up sooner, then they'll have a lot more fun in the process as well.
Yeah. And with that very valuable piece of advice, we'll close it there. How can people follow you on social media, contact you, and possibly look into you?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to find out more about ourselves, what we do, and connect is head to www.salesclosers.com. There's a chat box there. You can also get in touch or schedule a call with us, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm most active on there. Feel free to connect with me or send me a direct message.
Yeah. And for all the listeners out there, LJ's resources will be in links and show notes. Be sure to follow her on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, as well as her website, salesclosers.com. And you'll get to look into what she does and possibly book a strategy call. And with that, thanks so much for dropping so much nuggets of wisdom, and thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you, Christopher.